Good morning. This is Lisa Niver from We Said Go Travel, and I'm so excited to be here with author Laura Carney. Hi, Laura.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to hear about your book, My Father's List. It's incredible what's happening with the publicity for your book. Everyone wants to talk to you about this incredible journey you've been on. So tell all of the listeners a little bit about how did this happen? I know you found your father's bucket list. So tell us a bit about how that happened.
My father actually, he passed away in 2003 because of a distracted driver, and it's like a teenager who was making a phone call. And it wasn't until 13 years later, actually the year that I got married and my brother also got married. My husband and I were visiting my younger brother at his first house. He had just purchased a condo. So, we had gone up to celebrate that, and he was also like a couple weeks away from his wedding. And in the process of the move, he had found this little pouch that had my dad's list in it that nobody knew existed except for my mom. We found out later. She actually was there when he wrote it because I was a baby. It was 1978 when he wrote it.
Oh
But
my
yeah, like
God.
as soon as we saw it, it was like, gosh, it was just like a lightning bolt kind of moment where I knew immediately I needed to finish it for him. Like there's no waffling, no like, oh, that seems crazy. Like it was just we loved it so much because it was so funny and like the items on it were so him. Like, of course, this is what he wanted to do. And my husband was the one who actually said it first, like, this is your book. You need to finish this and write about it. And I always joke, thank goodness he said it before I did, because he ended up being like the main person who was doing these list items with me.
Oh my goodness. There's so much to talk about in that, what you just said. So first of all, I'm so sorry that about your father, that what a horrible thing for you to grow up without him. That must have been, I'm so sorry. I know
Yeah,
you've
I
been,
was 25, so I was an adult, but it was more like I didn't get to experience a lot of the adult milestones.
hmm. And I know you've done some activism about distracted driving.
I did actually. It's so weird. It's like I always like to say that everything goes back to running for me because I wasn't an athletic person. At least I didn't perceive myself, not since I was a kid. I played all different sports as a kid. But when I was 35, I took up running. It was just because my coworkers at Good Housekeeping were all running marathons. My old jobs, we went to happy hour, and this place, they didn't do that. They were more wholesome. So I thought, okay, I'll try running. And, next thing I knew, an article came across my desk one day about distracted driving. And it was about a man, his name's Joel Feldman, whose daughter had been killed by a distracted driver. And as soon as I saw it, I remembered that the driver had been on a phone in my dad's crash. So I called him up the next day. I said, I think I've had an experience with this. Can I help you? So he had me talking in a high school with him, like a few months later. And that was really the beginning of it because since I was already a runner now, I just started raising funds for him with my runs. And I think what happened was the running was helping me release my grief. Like I had so much, mostly anger, but anger and grief just bottled inside of me. And when I would be moving my body in this, vigorous way, it was almost like I was just releasing these toxins out, you know. And I would always find myself crying, not always, but often. And I think it was also because I felt like I was doing something empowering with the grief. Like here I am raising money for this organization that's trying to save lives. So, I did it that way. I never really became someone who was doing lots of talks. I think because, it wasn't my child. Like it wasn't, it was a little bit different for me. And I also started to feel like, something about it just I wasn't as good at as other people were. Like I just wasn't into the legal side as much. Like I'm a writer, I'm much more comfortable behind the scenes. So when the list appeared for me, it was just like, this is a really inspiring form of activism. Like this feels like something that is right for me to do because if I'm talking about someone's dreams, then I'm kind of illustrating to the world this is what's lost if a person loses their life. So that honestly, that yeah, my activism and my running, I think those were the catalysts for that moment to happen, and certainly my wedding too. But yeah, when I started doing the list, it's almost like everything in the years leading up to that had been preparing me for it.
so you were in the right place at the right time. And so
Absolutely.
so I think this is where I got confused. So the list he wrote when you were a baby. That's why I
Yep.
was thinking, okay, so do you know, did he do any of the things on the list before he died?
He did. Yeah. I mean, my brother and I were just marveling over the fact that he had checked off 5 of the items and marked one as having failed at. You
Oh,
know, just as many as like, he did things like a comedy monologue at a nightclub. Thank goodness, because I didn't want to do and he did go to the World Series game, and he wrote the score next to it as as proof. He helped his parents enjoy their retirement. He developed an impressive record collection. What was the 5th one that he did? Oh gosh, I can't remember.
that's
I can't
okay.
remember now what the 5th one was, but the one that he failed at was pay my dad back $1,000 plus interest, which made me kind of sad because it just meant that my grandfather passed away before he was able to do that.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's and so it seemed like I know you just said the World Series. I know there were quite a few sports ones, like the you went to the Rose Bowl and the Super Bowl. So were you a sporty family? Because you said you weren't that athletic.
Well, he and my brother were, and
Okay.
my brain would shut off when they would talk about sports. They loved sports. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, he took us to games, all kinds, basketball, baseball, college football games. Yeah, he was a huge sports fan. My brother was too. And I mean, he coached me in sports as though I was a boy. So
You were very athletic. Because I
as a
saw,
kid,
what was
yeah.
the picture? Something about the best seed. Was that tennis? But your foot was in a cast. Did you get
Yeah.
hurt?
That was arrogance on my part because I did play on the tennis team in high school and I considered it my best sport. So I thought, oh, I'll just do this in one day. This is fine. And I was playing against a friend, my husband's best friend, who's a tennis coach, and I was kind of having some stomach issues. And my husband was like, "Oh, I'll do it instead of you. It's okay." And I said, "No, no, no, no. I'm gonna get this done today." And like as soon as I got out there, like I just tore a tendon in my foot, like one wrong move, and then I had to get surgery. And I mean, that in a way became the most involved list item just because of what happened that day. And in many ways, my greatest teacher, because I realized I could have just not played, like. And anytime I approach a list item with arrogance, like this is going to be easy, or like arrogance or rushing, like let's just get this out of the way, it's stuff like that, like it doesn't work. That's been the case so what I started learning was if I'm doing this with humility, so no ego, I'm doing this with kindness, and I'm doing it to promote somebody else, that's usually when they work out.
Those are really good lessons for people listening who also want to do things from a bucket list that you really have to pay attention. There's risks personally, and you have to pick well. Tell us about corresponding with the Pope. How'd that happen?
I put that off towards the end, just because it seemed impossible. I thought this surely is the one. This is the one that's going to do me in. That it's going to be. He's you can't even call him he. The pronoun he uses is his holiness. His holiness, like his holiness might not respond. And I consulted a priest in New York, a Jesuit priest who is comfortable in the media. He works with Martin Scorsese. Like he does a lot. And he wrote me back unbelievably and said, just try it. He might write back. So I thought, well, this guy seems to have an audience with Pope Francis more than most priests. So maybe I'm not saying he put in a word for me, but maybe he knows something. So I went ahead and I wrote the letter, and I just crafted it really well. I put a lot of thought into what I wanted to tell His Holiness, and you can Google online. There's a proper etiquette to writing to the Pope, and most people don't know this, but he will write back, or somebody will who works under him, who they say represents him.
That's so amazing. So the Pope and then also a president you corresponded with, right?
Yeah, President Jimmy Carter. I was doing a TV show, an interview right at the very beginning of doing the list, and somebody wrote to me, someone emailed me and said, if any president will do, Jimmy Carter still teaches Sunday school every Sunday in Plains, Georgia. And he was
Aw.
92 at the time. He's not doing it anymore now, but so I emailed his health liaison, and she said she could give me a tour of the Carter Center if I came down. And she told me to get in touch with the innkeeper, because there's like one innkeeper in town, and she's the one who makes sure you can get into the church.
Oh,
Like you can
wow.
get a pew, because sometimes he would have 500 people and they couldn't get everybody in. So we basically like went in there, like we were VIPs. We got a seat right behind where he was sitting, but that still didn't ensure that I was going to be able to talk to him. It wasn't like just be in the vicinity of a president. It was talk to the president. So just by total coincidence, we ended up at the hotel at the same time as one of his biographers. And being a journalist, I had been binging everything Jimmy Carter for like a week, and so I could talk to him about him and kind of hold my own. And that went on for 2 or 3 hours
You talked to him for 2 or 3 hours?
in the parking lot. Yeah, my husband kind of chiming in sometimes, but mostly just watching it because he found it very entertaining.
Oh my goodness, how incredible.
Yeah, and he kept, it was funny because his name's Art Milnes. He's actually a Canadian speechwriter for prime ministers.
Okay.
And he kept throwing out all these names like George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush and people he'd met. Excuse
Bless
me.
you.
And thank you. And I got to my hotel room and just Googled it, and it's like there he was with each one of the men he'd been talking about. And Jimmy Carter even spent the night in his house once in Canada. So, I mean, we're pretty sure he put in a good word for us. And that's why I got a few sentences. But the funny thing is, like, we're still friends now. Like, I just talked to Art last week. And to this day, we still don't know. Like, we don't know if he said anything to him. And he'll probably never tell us.
Well, that's okay. I mean, what an incredible journey you've been on the last 5 years. And how had the experience of the COVID coaster change getting through some of your list? Like I
COVID
imagine
coaster.
that's what
That's the
I've been
first time
calling it, the
yeah, I've
COVID
never heard it called
coaster.
that before. Well,
Well,
it
because there's
was,
ups and downs in the COVID coaster.
that's true. That's very true. It's like, I don't want to sound like I benefited from the pandemic, because I
Okay.
certainly didn't. I had to stay away from my family just like everybody else did. And also, I mean, my husband and I are quite privileged in that we could both do our jobs from home. So, we didn't have to cope with a lot of hardships that so many people did. But at the same time, I was starting to write a book proposal then, and I suddenly had a lot of time and space to do that. I had list items that actually could be helped by the fact that we couldn't leave the house and we couldn't go certain places. So, like, have my own tennis court. Suddenly, a ping pong table sufficed because we didn't know when it was going to end. Like, we might have been trapped in the house forever. So that was the closest I was going to come to having my own tennis court. Own a large house on our own land. That ended up being a very large tent, which, if you look up house in the dictionary, it just says shelter. It says a couple things, but it says shelter. And, we couldn't travel anymore. Like, we were itching to travel, and the best we could come up with was camping. So I was sitting there, and it's like it occurred to me, oh my God, this is our large house. And we had just run every single street in our town just because we were so restless. And I thought, well, that's sort of like we owned our land. So there were a lot of things like that that happened during the pandemic that was almost like, I mean, quite honestly, what it was teaching me was, even in times that seem bleak and terrible, there's still like glimmers of hope in your everyday life. And that my dad's spirit, who had been helping me the entire time, like, he's still there helping me. He's still helping me find like the bright lining of everything.
That was very beautiful what you just said. Yes. And that's true. So during the COVID coaster, you had times where you weren't traveling, but quite a few of your list are traveling. Like you went to London and New Orleans. Were they places you also wanted to go, or it was really you went because it was on your dad's list?
Oh yeah, I mean, there wasn't ever a time where I was like, oh, St. Thomas. God, don't make me go there. Yeah, I wanted to go to all those places. And I had been. I mean, we'd been to Paris already. I'd been to Los Angeles already. I'd been to Chicago. I'd been to Las Vegas. So a lot of them I had already checked off. Yeah, it was thrilling to get to go to each of those places. Sometimes it started to feel a bit much. Like, we went to New Orleans and then San Diego and then Miami and then St. Thomas within a period of like 8 months. So it was a lot of traveling, and I got really good at traveling. I got so much better at packing, so much more efficient. Like, it just started. I remember at one point I felt like getting on a plane, to me, it started to feel like getting on a train, which is what, as a commuter to New York City, I would do every day. Um, but yeah, it was a really interesting way to travel too, I think, because I was always doing it as a researcher and as a
Hmm.
writer, and I'm always looking for the things like what would my dad have experienced if he checked this off himself. So usually that means very cultural or historic parts of the places I'm going to.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is, did you have a sense of how he picked the places? Was it like he wanted to go where the Rose Bowl was, or he wanted to see the movie studios, or was there a theme to it, do you think, or it was
Yeah,
just
I mean,
places?
well, like the Rose Bowl and the NCAA Final Four and also Super Bowl. I mean, because he's a sports nut, like we were talking about. Um, Especially football. He really loved watching football. I think you could kind of narrow down each of these places to one thing sometimes that he was probably most interested in. So, for example, Vienna is the city of music, and my dad was a singer. So, he loved the Vienna Boys Choir, and surely that's he was interested in the history of music, and that's why he wanted to go there. It was Vienna is also a cultural melting pot for Europe, and he was an American studies major who was also very interested in world history, so that would have been something that he was curious about. um London, I think everybody wants to go to London.
True.
But he loved King Arthur. He was a writer. He loved literature. So those are the things I'm focusing on when I went to London. And we actually made a side trip to Ireland, which is where my family's from. So that was really amazing too. And then as far as San Diego goes, I had to go sailing in San Diego because that's where people do it. I mean, the most naval bases in the world are in San Diego, and my dad helped. He actually was like he has a publishing company on the side, and he helped his friend publish her book called Sailing is Fun in the 70s. So I think that's probably what he would have wanted to do. She was joking with me once though. She said he was handing it out at like marinas where they already know how to sail. But anyway, that's why I did that. New Orleans, similar, that we went to Jazz Fest. That's a town that's famous for music. um yeah, that's really how I was narrowing things down. St. Thomas, I think he probably wanted to go there just because in the 70s the Caribbean became a very popular place for people to want to travel to, so I think that's probably what that was about.
And so I noticed when you were talking about the different places, you mentioned Vienna and singing, and you recorded some songs also as part of this, right?
Yeah, I did. It's funny, I've been featured now on 3 TV shows singing. And it's been a different song each time. No, sorry, not no 2 TV shows and NPR. All of a sudden, I hear my voice at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and each time
Congratulations.
without instrumental accompaniment. Thank you, but I don't think of myself as a singer.
Oh, but
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think I think a lot of people don't think of themselves as a singer or a sailor or an athlete. And I think it's really inspiring for people that you did it anyway.
yeah, I can carry. I have good pitch. I can carry a tune, and the singing was almost like any other list item. I mean, I've told people sometimes when I did Swim the Width of a River, I was like in the middle of this river and just thinking, how am I going to do this? And all of a sudden I could. Like I was a much less panicked person going like coming back. And things like that would happen all the time where suddenly I felt more confident and like I couldn't fail if I had my dad helping me and if I was doing it to honor him. So the same thing happened with singing. Like I remember being startled when I first heard my voice while recording with my cousin who was helping me because he's a musician. And I said, "What did you do to it?" And he's like, "Nothing. This is just you." And I thought something's going on here. Like clearly like my dad's helping me. Like, and I feel like he helped me write the book too, quite honestly. Because sometimes you write a passage and you're like, did I do that? Like that's like I can't do. I'm not usually that good. You know what I mean?
I think it's fantastic. I have to say, I looked at the pictures you shared with me, one of my favorites was grow a watermelon.
Oh, that's everybody's favorite. It's so quirky. It's so unusual. I mean, he liked to eat watermelon. Like that's like closest I can come to for why he would have wanted to do that. Plant an apple tree, that's easier to figure out because he's so American, and that's Johnny Appleseed. That's such an American thing to do. I don't know why he wanted to grow watermelon, but we don't have a backyard. We live in an apartment. So I actually just grew it in a pot on my fire escape. And my husband helped a lot with that because he's a morning person. I'm a night person. So he was watering it every morning and I was watering it every evening. And by the end of the summer, we did have one little baby golf ball sized super bush baby watermelon. And they're supposed to get to be about like bowling ball size, but I think it's because our bucket was so small that it only reached like but I mean, it still tasted good.
Well, I think that everybody is going to love learning more about you and your dad's list in your book. So tell everybody, where can they find more if they want to see the pictures, they want to hear you singing, they want to buy the book. What's the best way to find you? What should they do?
Oh, well, you can pre-order the book at bylauracarney.com. That's my website. I also have a newsletter, sign up on there. I'd like to update everyone every week on what's going on. And my father's list on everywhere, Instagram, Facebook. And if you want to go to Twitter, I'm LAC30.
So everywhere on the internet. So your book is available for pre-order. And if people want to see you more, you've been everywhere lately. The Daily Blast, Lester Holt, People Magazine. Congratulations on so much incredible coverage for your book, My Father's List. And I agree with you. I'm sure your father helped you with these challenges, and I bet he's just so proud of what you've accomplished.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it really, a lot of the lesson for me was just letting go and just believing that he was.
Yeah, this has been so much fun to talk with you. I wish you the biggest and greatest success. And just, oh my gosh, I just can't wait until the next book comes out when you get to do your bucket list.
Yeah. Yeah, I am already doing it. So that might be a good idea.
Oh, you are doing a whole nother list of your own? That's awesome. All right. Well, we'll have to talk about that on the next podcast. So
Okay.
thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.